Okay, so I've got my contrast thread in here. I've just chosen this pink as just as a colour to use. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a straight running stitch, but I'm going to extend my stitch length. So I'm going to change it from where I am, and I'm going to change my stitch length up to a to a 4. And then I'm also at the same time going to reduce down or lessen off my tension dial here. So I usually sew with it at a 5, and I'm going to take that down to a 2. So what that will do is it'll mean that the more thread will come through and the stitches won't form as tightly, so that when we're trying to gather that up, it'll work easier. So I'm going to choose a point here on the curve of the top of the sleeve, and I'm going to leave about the first inch or so of that curve without any gathering stitches in, and I'm going to do 1 row of stitches quite close to the edge first, and then we're going to go back and do another. I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if you've got a machine that cuts the ends off, you need to switch that off, because you need to have ends on your threads to start with this. So let's go first and just do 1 little row of stitches around here. Let's put our needle in our work so that we can pivot around the top of this curve. And we're going quite close to the edge. Just eyeballing it. So this one wants to be just slightly less than 1/4 of an inch. Okay, needle up, and then hold on to your threads while you just pull this through. Leave some long threads. So that's our first one. So we've got some threads for the start and some threads for the stop, and we've got that 1 row of stitches going around here. And then, keeping those original threads out of the way, we're going to do another row of stitching slightly further out, so that the idea is that your 1/4 of an inch stitches will fall in the middle of these 2 rows of stitching. So let's just show you on this one. So there we are. So there we've got our 2 rows of stitching. Just make sure your rows don't touch, and make sure they don't cross over each other. They need to be 2 separate rows, and both of them need to have these long ends, because then what we can do is we separate out these ends so that we take the top threads from the bottom, and then by holding on to the threads and tightly, and then holding on to our fabrics, we can pull our fabric up tight along these threads, and just by using your fingernail you can just move those gathers along. Let's go to the side, separate out the top from the bottom threads, and I'm holding on to both of the top threads together, that's important, and pulling them at the same time at the same speed, and then you're going to be able to get these little gathers that form as you pull that round, and then that will start to give you this lovely little curve on the top of your sleeve cap. Can you see that, how that's sort of like folding in on itself? Hopefully you can. And those little gathers will mean that when we start to sew these into the sleeves, that they will fit in nicely, and it takes up the excess on that fabric, so that when you sew that in, that sleeve is going to go in nicely. You can see it hanging off my fingers, look like that. So we're going to do those same 2 rows of threads on all of our on our 2 outers. We've done 1 already, another outer, and then our 2 lining pieces as well, so that they've all got the same gathering stitches in the same way. And just gather them up a little bit just to get them started, and we'll adjust them when it comes to actually fitting these sleeves in. So this is the bit that we're going to do next. So if you do all 4 and then just gather them slightly, and then I'll meet you back here and I'll show you how to set your sleeves in. Okay, so I have finished working with the machine for the moment, and I've swapped my thread back to my dark brown that I'm using. But the thing that you need to remember after you've done your gathering stitches is to turn your tension dial back to where is your normal stitching tension, because if you're not careful, and yes, I have done it before, you will now carry on sewing your garment, but your tension will be wrong, and all those seams won't be as tight as they need to be. So I try and get in the habit that after I've changed my thread for doing my gathering stitches, when I put my ordinary thread back in again, the main one I'm using, I automatically just remember to do the tension dial as well. So it's just a little tip, but you'll be surprised how easy it is to forget. Right, so what we're going to do now is let's go back to our jacket. Now, let's have a look. I've got the lining there, so let's put our 2 sleeves for our lining out the way along with our lining so we don't get it mixed up, because it's very easy to get mixed up with all of these pieces. And then we've got our 2 sleeve pieces. Now if, like me, you've marked 2 notches on the back for your back sleeve and 1 on the front, I'm just working out whether I've got 2 there or 1. That looks like 1, and I've got 2 there, so I know the 2 notches is my back. So I'm now going to take this sleeve, I've got my jacket right side up on my work surface, and where those 2 notches are, they're going to go right side together onto the back of my jacket. You see, it just took me a moment there just to orientate it, and this is how it can be. The first thing I'm going to do is I've got my 2 notches against the back of my jacket, and then I'm going to then, keeping those threads out the way, some are forward and some are back for the sleeve. You're just going to match that underarm point first. Oops, come on, threads out the way. That's it. So let's do that front underarm first. So you're matching the underarm of the sleeve against the underarm of the back of the jacket. And then I'm going to come round again, and I'm now going to look for where the centre notch is on the top of my sleeve. So I know I've already got my other one marked down, and that top notch from the centre of the sleeve at the top sleeve head is going to go right against the shoulder seam where you joined the back and the front together. And you're going to put another pin in just there. Watch your fingers. Make sure the seam allowance is open if you can. And then I'm going to come down again now to the other side. So this is the front I've got in my hand, and I'm matching that to the underarm point on the front of my on the sleeve as well. So if I show you from this side, you can see there we've got the gathering stitches for our sleeve just there around the top here. This is one underarm and this is the other. So if on a sleeve, there's one underarm point just there, and here's the other one here, and then my centre notch is around here, and those are the 3 points that I've just matched up. Once I've got those 3 points matched up, I just smooth the first inch or so where there's no gathering down, and I'll pop another pin in at that point there. So just smooth that down, make sure you've not got any tucks or anything in it or any puckers, and that will then just hold that point, so almost to the start of the gathering stitches. And then I go back to the other side. Threads are getting all over the place, look, today. It's this fabric, I think it's holding on to them. And then I smooth that down so those seams, underarm seams, match perfectly without any gathering on them up until that about an inch point, and put another pin in there. Then what we're going to do then is we're going to start and match the arm side here with the top of the sleeve, and we've got the little gathers in, don't forget, and you might have to either tighten your gathers up or loosen them off until the top of the sleeve is exactly the same length as the arm side that you're fitting it into. So just ease your gathers along if you can until that's the same length. Your gathers are going to look a little bit in the way, but don't worry, just so long as the actual length at the sewing line is the same, you'll be fine. So I can see there that that's just sitting in there just nicely. Just make sure you've got no puckers on your sewing line, and that that's lying all nice and flat, and no puckers on your outside of your fabric here. And then we're going to do the same on this side, which is the other side. So get your little got caught up, and just either tighten those up or straighten them off. Those are pretty good actually. Raw edges together, really important to have your raw edges together on sleeves. And then you're going to put a pin in just there as well. I'm going to show you on the lining because it might be easier on a lighter fabric to be able to see this. So that's how that's now looking with those pins in around here. But if you look around the actual body of the jacket, that one's not quite raw edges together, is it, Claire? So reappoint that one. Then there's no puckers in the actual body of the jacket. And if I go to the inside of my sleeve, you've got the gathers tightening up the fabric, but just make sure that when you run your fingers across, you're not going to sew in any puckers on the sleeve either. Let me go on to my lining just to show you, because that might be easier with this paler fabric. So again, there's my jacket. Let's look for my notches, and there's one notch that's going to go to the front of my jacket. So when I lay my sleeve so that I've got my right side together against the back here, I want my one notch to go against the front of my jacket, which is the one that we've got here. So I'm going to put one pin in at that underarm point first. Can you see? So that's, let's get the orientation. There's my shoulder, and this is the arm side I'm sewing round. And this sleeve is going to twist round and fit into this arm side. So we've got to get our match points first. That was the first one. Then we look for the notch on the top of the shoulder, which is there. And then we find our match point. Now, remember I've got that little jig in my sewing just there. Can you see the difference here between the lining and the outer? I'm just going to take that off slightly. Just a small slither, but it'll just make a smooth transition. Just done that. And that's literally all I've taken off. Look, it's a very little piece, but it'll make all the difference. Then we're going to find our sleeve again. Let's find that centre notch on the top of the sleeve. And that centre notch on the top of the sleeve goes against the shoulder seam on the arm side. Pin in the top there. Just make sure that raw edges are together. So those are the 2 points. And then I find my other pointed edge here of my sleeve. And that's going to go against the bottom down here on the back. Now you may well find that get some more pins. You may well find that the stretchy fabric lies better than your cotton fabric. That's totally normal. It's just because it's got that elastic in it. So just take your time. So again, I've got the straight first inch. So let's smooth that out so those raw edges just lie on top of each other, and put a pin in on one side. And let's go and do it on the other side so we don't forget. Pull the threads out because they're getting mixed up. See how my threads are all poking out? Let me just get those through on the other side. Just makes it easier just to keep straight. So there's flat edges together for the first inch and from that arm side point underneath until those gathering stitches, okay? And then this bit here is open and that bit there is open. So now I can pull on my gathering stitches to just make that until that edge is the same size, shape and length as, and it needs a little bit more pulling up. And this is the same way that you put sleeves into dresses or into jackets for adults or children's clothing as well. So all of these skills are directly transferable. So I can see in there I've got some little gathers and they're going to sew in. Lining's not quite so important, you might say. And if you're a beginner, cut yourself some slack on the lining. But if you want to be perfect, then try and do it without any puckers in that cotton fabric. So I've put another pin in the middle there. And then now we can check the back of this jacket and just make sure that's all smooth. You can usually feel it with your fingers if it's going to lie flat. Make sure your raw edges are together. And then let's put another pin in just there as well. So that's just showed you on both the, I'm just going to reside that top one. I think it's just got a little bit too much fabric that side. That's it. Okay, so what you're looking for is that when you look on the outside of the jacket around the edge here, you've not got any puckers. That's the, because we see the dart there, look, so that's the back of the jacket. So no puckers on that arm side. And on the front here, no puckers there. Just got to be careful at that point there. Look how it was trying to fold in. And then on the inside, you're just trying to make those creases and those gathers just so small and so thin that there's nothing going to pucker up on the inside. It just takes the excess fabric up a bit so that you can sew it in nice and neatly. So, doing one at a time, I'm going to go back to my main jacket. Got my dark brown thread in. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our time. Now, if you do want to tack this, again, you can do first before you sew it if you're not used to all of these pins sticking out at the front here like this. But it is possible to take your time. It's a slow stitch anyway, so you're not zooming. So you should be able to, if you wanted to try, then you can do. If you want to just take a moment to get rid of all these pins, or especially if you're sewing with a youngster, then you might want to take those pins out and tack it first. Or if you don't like being prickled by the pins, of course, then just tack that in. I'd use a different colour again. So use a green or a blue if you've used the pink for the tacking threads and you've got dark brown for your sewing threads. And that will take the pins out and make sure everything's lying flat before you sew it. But if you want to have a go, then we're just going to line up our 1/4 inch seam allowance on the edge there. We're going to take a few stitches forward and a few stitches back. Make sure you've got your stitch length again back down to the correct length, which is mine is a 2.2. As you could tell, I'd forgotten to do that, and then we're going to put our needle in the work because we will have to manipulate this fabric around a bit whilst we're working with it. So I've got the back of my jacket down, so the main body of my jacket I've got down against my sewing bed because that is actually going to stay flat, and it's the sleeve that I want to ease in. Now it's actually slightly different when you are working with adult clothing, because you would normally put your sleeve, the longest side, down against it, and the machine will help you ease that in. But on these smaller garments I've found that it's easier for me to just sew with the flatter side against the back, because then I can see and manipulate these areas where we're going to have problems. So I'm going to stop here now, lift up my presser foot, and I'm just going to manipulate the front of that jacket a little bit. So I just pull the fabric forward, and it just helps, just if you keep doing that periodically, it just helps ease the fabric through. Just keep remembering to keep all the bulk of your fabric underneath, and you can feel with your finger about the next ½ inch before you then get to a pin, and then just take it out. You can always lift your presser foot up and just take it nice and steady. And it's quite delicate kind of sewing, so again, just take your time, lift your presser foot up, oops, and then just move some of this fabric, the bulk of the fabric back, so that will help it all sit nice and flat. Then we're going to do a little bit more. Just keep moving it all back. I'm just looking for it to be flat where your stitching line is. It's going to be gathered slightly where you've got your gathering line on the edge, but you just need it to be flat on those edges otherwise. Got threads all in the way. And you're aiming ideally to sew in between those two lines of your gathering stitches. Come to the end, and then we're going to reverse at the end. Needle out of the work. Oh my, mine just keeps dropping down like that, sorry. And there we go, let's have a little look. So we've got a little sewn line across. Let me take off my starting and stopping threads. So that's all sewn down, the seam allowance is down, and then that's all nice and flat. And then if we have a look, move some of these threads out of the way, then I think we might have managed it without any puckers. So I'm happy that that's fine. If you do find you've got a pucker where your fabric has folded over and you can see it, so when you turn your jacket round this way, and if you can see like a fold in the fabric, then what you can do is you can just go in and take out the stitch on top of the fold and a few stitches either side until that fabric will lay flat for you with your fingers. And then you can just join your stitches back up again here, a little way sort of before the gap that you've just created, and then sew over. So don't take it all out and start again, just correct the bit where you'd got the puckers. And then when we've done that, we're just going to take one set of the gathering stitches at a time and take the top thread out and then the bottom. And then we're going to just pull on the other gathering stitch, just carefully, and it should just come straight out like that. And then we're going to pull on the other side as well to take that out. So all 4 of those are out, so we can throw those away. And then we can then go back to our jacket and turn it round the other way and have a look, and we'll see that we've got a nicely fitted sleeve inside that jacket ready. And just as a fluke, my lines, oh my, look at the pattern matching. That one's just slightly off, but the rest are all pretty good. Completely accidental. So once you've done that with that one, you're now going to repeat that on the other 3 so that you've got 4 done already. And you've already seen that, so just reverse the video if you need to see any more. So I'll put my other one in this jacket in here, and the 2 in my lining in exactly the same way, and then we'll meet back here again to discuss what we're going to do next. So I just wanted to show you this, because on my sleeve and my lining, my fabric had folded back like that as I was sewing my sleeve in on the lining, and so it meant that I got a bit that I got to unpick. So what I've done is I've located where the start and the stop of the problem was, which was between there and about there on my sewing, and I've undone the stitches, unpicked those stitches in that area. So what I'm going to do now is, can you see how the edges of the fabric weren't together? So that's why that had just kind of come undone. So now what I'm doing is I'm just going to reposition that fabric back in place. I haven't taken out my gathering stitches, they're all still there. So I'm going to manipulate the fabric back to where it should be with my fingers, if it'll behave. And I'm going to put a pin in the middle of where it needs to be sorted. And I know that I'm going to put a red pin where I know that I need to stop, because that everything's all fine at that point onwards. There's my red pin. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this back into the machine, and I'm going to sew that section again between there. So I'm going to start a little way before the stitches that I unpicked, and that will act as a knot, if you like. So that holds that together. I can put a couple of stitches back if I want to, needle in the work. And then I have got my body of my jacket up, but so it's just so that I can just keep an eye on it. And I can see my sleeve is still wanting to poke out underneath, so I'm just going to use my fingers to manipulate that fabric. And I've got the point of my quick unpick just holding it in place. A few stitches forward, so we know we've got it down now. And now I can lift up the presser foot, just manipulate my fabric again to make sure that it's as right as it can be. And lying flat. Let's do a few more stitches. This is what I say, you might need to do this on the cotton, because it doesn't want to stretch quite as nicely as the stretchy fabric wanted to. And then around, and then take my pin out. And again, it's just showing you that you don't have to undo everything, you can just correct the bit that wasn't behaving itself. And hopefully we get it right this time. Follow the same stitching line as before, a couple of stitches just to hold that together. And take those threads off. And I will have corrected where I went wrong, so that's corrected that. And if we go from the inside and have a little look, then that has corrected that all the way along there, and I can now take out my gathering stitches. So as I say, it just means you don't have to undo the whole thing, you just go back and just correct in between where you needed to, and then you can take your gathering stitches out, and then you'll have your nicely sewn in sleeve. Okay, I've just got one more to do, and hopefully that one will go in without any trouble, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so when you finish, then what you'll have is your jacket. If I hold it this way up, you'll probably be able to see it a little better. So here's our back of our jacket here. Here's our two sleeves, and there's the back of the fronts there that we've got. So if we turn these over, you'll see green lining for the sleeves, and then here's the actual reveres that are going to fold out. That's the inside of the jacket, as you'll see. And again, on this side, we've got the back of the jacket with the darts in, the two sleeves, and then we've got the two fronts, and this one's got the collar attached to it. So the next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is I am going to ask you to now find either the line, I'll use it on the lining, I think that'll be easier to think of. And what you're going to do is where you've got your sleeve, so you've got your hem of your sleeve here, we're first going to press this, or at least finger press it, so you've got a bit of a seam. So I would do about 0.5 centimetre to 1 centimetre seam on there. And on the other one, you can just finger press it. Can you see how it's just got that little foot crease in it now? Just from finger pressing it. And finger pressing it means you just use the heat and the moisture from your fingers and your fingernails to just run along that seam on the cotton side, and that will just fold that up for you. It's just going to give you a reference. Okay, like that. Because then what we're going to do now is we're going to again look for where our sleeve is on the bit we've just finger pressed, and we're going to fold the sleeve in half so that the long edge of the sleeve is together. And we're going to put first a pin, I've got it folded out, and we're going to put a pin down the bottom just there. We're then going to follow that seam up until the underarm point, and we're going to match our seams there. So they're on one and top of each other, and put a pin in. And then we're going to then come down the side seams here on the side of the jacket. Now, you know that I referenced earlier that the back of the jacket seemed to be shorter than the front, and that's evidenced by this little section just here. I don't know why that is on the pattern, because I've measured the pattern, and the sewing line on the pattern is different as well. On here, the one is longer than the other. So whether it's just a design feature or not, I don't know, but this line here is longer than this straight line here, and it does come out at an angle just there, and this one is straight, so maybe that accounts for it. I don't know. We'll deal with it when we get to it, so just for the moment let's not worry. But I just wanted to let you know that don't pull your lining right down to the bottom of the jacket, because it might not fit when you've added your seam allowance on. And I checked on that sewing line just so that you know. And then put another pin along the edge of that sleeve, because what we're going to do now is we're going to sew down from here, from the cuff down to the underarm point. We're going to pivot and change direction, then we're going to come down to the bottom here, and then we're going to finish here, all at 1/4 inch, as we always do on these little small garments. So let's pop this into our machine, and we're going to take a few stitches forward, a few stitches back, and then we are going to take our pin out and put our needle in our work. And we're going to carry on to this underarm point just here. Just make sure everything's lying all nice and flat, nothing's folded up underneath itself. And you're going to try and stop right on that sewing line where you attached these sleeves together, sleeves into the jacket. So keep going to get closer. And then we're going to stop right on that point, and then we're going to leave our needle in the work, lift up our presser foot and pivot round, and then we're going to follow down this side seam now of the jacket. When we get to the bottom of the lining, I'm just going to reverse at that point just there. This is different to how it says in the instructions, so just so that you know, but this is going to give us a beautifully clean inside edge to the jacket. So that's got that edge done. And if I turn this round, you'll see we've got the start of our jacket. That's formed our sleeve now as a cone, and there's our sleeve fitting into the front of the jacket, and here's the back lining. Okay, just turn that back round again, because that was just to show you. So now we're going to do the same on all the other 3 underarm seams. So you've got another one to do on your lining. So again, find the sleeve, the long straight edge of the sleeve, put that together, and pop your pin in there, your underarm and your hem, and you're going to do exactly the same on your jacket as well. You're going to put your cuff edge together, your underarm and your sleeve and the edge of the jacket together, and then you're going to sew those together. Okay, and then we're going to meet back here and we will look at what we're going to do next. So once you've done those underarm seams, you've actually made your jacket into an actual working jacket now with its collar and etc. But what we're going to do now is we are going to keep we've got our outside of our main jacket with the collar on, and we're going to take the right side of our lining and we're going to lie this on top so that this notch in the centre of the back of the jacket, the back of the neckline, matches with the notch on the back of the lining, and we're going to put a pin there. Just be careful because it tends to want to form a bit of a pleat there, so just make sure that's fitted in nicely. Then go to where your shoulder seams are, and your shoulder seams need to be open and they should lie right on top of each other as well, and put a pin on there. This is where it's going to test your seam allowances on these small garments. Then come across to the end of the lapel and then match that right angle at the end of the lapel. Let's put a pin in there. I'm going to put that in at an angle. And then we're going down to the front of the bottom of the jacket and we're going to put a pin down there. Make sure your sides are all together, because all of that should all match up perfectly. Where this long edge is down the front of the jacket there, let's put an extra pin in there just to hold that together for us so that it behaves itself. And then again here, where we've got the notch, notch A that matches at the end of the collar, let's put a pin to hold that together. I'm just going to put it the collar side so that that controls that all nicely. Okay. And then just in the middle of this back of this neck of this jacket, just smooth that down so that everything's lined nicely, and then you can put another pin just in there as well if you want to. So again, it might be better to tack this after we've actually put the pins in, because that'll be easier. Then we're going to match up the other side. So let's go back to the other side. Let's get our shoulder seam and match that onto the top of the other shoulder seam and pin in. Let's go to the corner at the top of the lapel And let's put a pin in to match that. And then let's go down to the bottom of the front of the jacket, and then let's just match that up as well and put a pin in there. So we've now pinned the lining to the outer of the jacket, and here we've got, so that's the centre front, that's the bottom hem point, up to the front of the lapel at the top here. Here's where the collar is attached, round the back of the neck. Shoulder seams are both on top of each other, so that those match points are right. And then we've come the other side here. Let me just put a pin in on that collar because I can feel it flapping around a little bit. And then let's just have another pin down the front of this jacket as well to hold that together. And I think we will just do some tacking stitches around this to hold it, because we've got that all together for the main part. What I want to do now is I want you to tuck your sleeves in inside, so they might be, actually let's tuck those round so that the sleeves are inside out. That'll be easier to control those. And then I want to match down the bottom here. So we've got that little step. Can you remember we had that little step between the lining and the outer here? Let's match the front of our jacket first, because we're going to tack it and then we're going to snip it a little bit. So that's along the edge there. So these side seams here should match up as well together. Let's push those towards the back and put a pin into there. And that's just highlighted that little step, so we'll know where to snip. And then let's leave the back open at the moment, and let's come over to the other side and let's match up where the lining and the outer is going to match those front bits. And let's put another pin in there. And then along the bottom here, let's put a pin in here. So I've actually got my jacket upside down at the moment in my hands, so you can see. So what we've done is we've gone from the bottom edge, this is the back here, and here's our sleeves. And I've pinned from along the front of one, up the top to the neckline, round the back where we've got the collar tacked in. I have another pin in there, I think, as well, just to hold that right for me. That's it. Around the back of the neck, across to the other edge of the front, and then down the front, and then across the bottom of the hem along the front here. See if I can see a picture on here that I can sort of show you. We're kind of going from this point here under the arm, across the front there, up, the collar's tucked in all the way around the back of the neck, and then we're coming back down the other side and then to the underarm. So at the moment the back is completely open. But what I want you to do is match the back and sort of to almost at the bottom of the dart, and then I want you to just take a red pin, if you've got one, and put a pin in just there. And then from the other side seam to the bottom of the dart, make sure the edge bottoms match. I want you to put another red pin in, because the red pin trick means that we don't sew between those 2 points just there. The rest of it we can tack. So everything's all covered round in pins now, and we're going to leave this little bit open for turning our jacket out once we've finished. And that should be enough, I think, just to, between those 2 darts, that should be enough. So let's get our tacking threads together. I need a bit more than that. Sorry if I just knocked the camera. And I think that when you're working with so many pins like this, it will just help us to keep everything together without stabbing ourselves as we sew. That's it. Quite a long piece of thread, but we can always get another one if we need it, if I've not done it long enough. Sometimes too long and it gets tangled on all the pins, so we'll see. So let's start. I'm going to start on the back side because you'll be able to see the white here. I've got my jacket upside down, so I'm going to do along this bottom hem first. So along the hem here first, before then we start to go up at the top. So I'm starting from one of the darts, and I'm just going to sew my my tacking stitches. I might call it basting as well. It's the same principle. In England we call it tacking stitches. And I'm going to ignore the fact that there is a jump in my fabric at this point just here, because I'm going to just smooth that out. So let's just go across the side here, and I'm just going to imagine that there's an imaginary line. Oops. Should I draw it in just to show you? Let me just draw it in to show you. So I'm going to scoop the front round to there like that. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. Let me just do it a bit darker. Hold on one second. So I'm going to, can you see where I've got this jump here at the bottom of the side of the fabric? There's a difference there in the fabric. So this is actually that way up, isn't it? So this is the back with the darts in. I don't know if you can see those. And then at this point here where the back meets the front, I've got a step in my fabric on both sides. So what I've drawn is I've drawn a pencil line, a chalk line, and I'm going to use that to snip this bit off. So I've taken it as long as I can do at the front, but I've just done a slightly curved edge just to take this notch off. You'll see in a minute. So what I'm trying to say is that when I'm tacking, oops, and everything's got all tangled up, is I'm tacking as if that little edge was cut off already. So let me just do my tacking stitches and you'll see, and then in a minute we're going to be snipping that other little bit off. But I want to snip off both sides together so that they match, and that's why I'm not snipping it off while they're both separate. Let's just tack them together first. And we can take out some pins as we go so that we make it a little bit easier for ourselves to navigate around this garment. Just make sure your tacking stitches are lying flat and you've not got any gathers or any puckers in them, and just go all the way around the same way. Now remember that when you go round by the collar, you've already tacked that once, but just carry on as if your tacking stitches weren't there, and you will go through all the layers. So I'm going through all the layers, front and back, to tack this. Taking pins out as we go. So that's what it's going to look like. So once you've tacked, so I'm tacking from the bottom of one of the darts across the front here. I'm smoothing that line out across to the front, jack it up here, round the back, and all the way down to my other red pin, and that will tell me to stop. So I'm not going to record all of that because obviously it'll make the video a lot longer, but just keep going and you'll see when you have to stop, and then that will then help us not have to navigate the pins when we're sewing it together. Okay, so I've just finished tacking mine, so this is what it looks like. Here's the sleeves poking out from everything's inside out, don't forget. And I've got the space between the two darts is left free with no tacking stitches on it. That gives us our space then to turn this round the other way round when it's finished. And then I've tacked all the way along the front here, up to the lapel, round the back of the neck. You see the double lots of stitches where my collar was already tacked on. So I've just gone straight through that again, down the front and across the back again. Now before I sew this, remember we've got this little sort of like jig and I penciled in that mark. What I want to do now is just smooth off, move that sleeve out the way, is I'm going to snip this bit off here just to smooth that across. So that's the same length. So can you see how that's now looks like it's all smooth and all one? Let's do the same again on the other side. So if you want to be absolutely identical, you can always lay one piece on top and then cut off. So if you're worried you're going to cut off not enough, but I think that we can do this fairly easily. But just make sure you don't take off too much. So your pieces that you cut off should be about the same in their length in terms of where they are and how long they are that you've taken off out of both pieces. So that then, that was the lining, wasn't it? That's it. So those pretty much look the same to me, so I'm happy that that's going to be about equal. Okay, so I can put those bits in the bin. And then what we're going to do now is going to put this into our machine, and we're going to start sewing from one start of the tacking, leaving this section open, and we're going to sew all the way around this jacket. We're getting there, we're not far off being finished really, because there's no buttons to sew on, then it's quite easy, isn't it? So let's just have a look here. Just where you can, just make sure you've got your seam allowances going towards the back as you want. And then 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to reverse at the start and stop. So reverse and then needle in the work so we can pivot. And then let's just smooth this down, take our time. And sew along this bottom edge first. So I always start on the straighter edge. I start on a nice easy bit first before we get too far. Make sure you've got your 1/4 inch going up the front, and this has got to be even on both sides, so keep to that seam allowance. This is going up the front. One more stitch, I think, and then we're going to pivot, and now we're going to come around the neck. So just keep your sleeves out the way. Make sure the ones underneath as well are out the way, so you're not going to be sewing anything underneath that you don't want to. I think I've called it a swoosh before, haven't I? Where you swoosh everything down and make sure that it's not getting in your way. You can hear the machine struggling where the fabric is thicker. And we'll check those stitches as well just to make sure that it's worked okay. It's a nice gentle curve around the back of the neck. And then along over the neck shoulder. Edge of the collar. And come to the top of the point at the top of the lapel, that's it. And then down one side. Let's make sure those sleeves are staying out of the way. Front to the bottom, one more stitch maybe. Maybe one more stitch after that, that's it. And then across the front, again, which is the bottom front hem. And then across towards where we started our stitching, this reverse. Okay. Take off your starting and your stopping threads unless your machine does it for you. Just tidy up as we go along. And then that's what we've got. So let's just have a quick look at our stitches, make sure they're all holding up nicely. Make sure we've got, oh, I've got a little pucker there, look, can you see where I've got a little fold in the fabric? Let's do what I said before. So take out the stitch that's holding the puckers down and then just start to ease that fabric back, and you're going to undo about 2 or 3 stitches either side. So just to release that fabric down. That's it. And then when I put my fingers on there, can I pull that fabric straight so that it won't pucker? Not yet. Something else is holding it, so I need to do a few more stitches this side just to undo that so that it can hold it straight. Oh, it is held straight, isn't it? Held fast. Undo that stitch there. Do you know what would be better if I had my glasses on? Hold on 1 second. Be able to see a little better what's going off. Here's the fabric stitch from the other side. So I think that's it. That was holding it down. So then I can smooth the fabric so that it's nice and smooth from both sides with my fingers. And I'm going to put it with the pucker side up so that I can see where that is. And I'm going to make sure there's nothing tucked up underneath. And I'm going to start a few stitches ahead of where I undid. And then I'm going to go needling the work. And then I'm going to pull the fabric either side so that it's straight. And then I'm going to sew and join those stitches back up together again and just go a little bit past where I was. There we go, and that's taken that pucker out, which is great. So that now is all lying all nice and flat there at the back of the neck. And then just check we've not got anything anywhere else. No, that's all sewn nicely. That's all sewn well. Okay, so we've got a little bit of housekeeping to do. So anywhere we've got a right angle, like the front of the jacket, at the front here, then we're going to take off those corners and we take it off at 45 degrees first, and then just take off a smidge more. Don't just stay a couple of threads away from your stitches. And then again on here, look for where your stitches are. And you want to just take off just slightly more than that 45-degree angle. Could have taken out our tacking threads first, couldn't we, as well? I suppose I was too eager to get on. So let's take out our tacking threads now. because the other thing we need to do is just clip around the back of the neck as well. So let's take this thread, let's cut through this tacking thread here. You might find that you'll have gone through your stitches and it won't go very far. If you have, just cut closely to where your stitches are able to gather up. Use my quick unpick, that's what the job is for. Make sure you've not got any of your others, and then one side should pull out, and then you should be able to ease the other side out. Can you see how easily that came out then? Let's carry on around this corner. So take out all of your tacking stitches the same way. It's just where you cross over your fabric with your machine stitches, not fabric, your tacking stitches. Can you tell I'm concentrating? I can't get the right words. Okay, and then you're going to have that double row of tacking across the back of the collar. So to make sure you take out both of those rows of stitching. So I've just removed all of my tacking threads. Now what you want to do on the collar, on this neckline, so this is the neckline at the top of the shoulder seams, is we're just going to use some sharp scissors and we're just going to cut some little snips into the fabric all the way through all of those layers. We're not going beyond our stitch line, we're using just a millimetre away from our stitch line, but we just need to release this edge. Just make sure you're only snipping what you want to snip and not snipping anything that you shouldn't. And this will just help the jacket turn around the right way properly and just everything just to lie flat. The neck, especially because the cotton doesn't give as much as the stretchy fabric does. So let me just do a couple of extra snips in the cotton fabric only. So just on the back of the lining, I'm just making the snips a little more close together than they are on the jacket where it's the stretchy fabric. So fabric doesn't like to be snipped. But it will help it lie flatter. There we go. Okay. So I'm happy with all of that now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reach inside and we are going to find a corner. We're going to start and turn this jacket out. Now you're not going to want to pull too much because we don't want to snap any threads, but as I say, that 2-inch gap should be, that's round about 2 inches, isn't it? Gap should be fine. So just keep pushing it all the way through. Pull your sleeves out. And for now, just push your sleeves, your lining of your sleeves into your other sleeve, into your outer sleeve, just so it kind of will sit properly. We'll do something with those in a minute. Sometimes when you look at something like this and it's all scrambled up together like this, you think, how can this even going to make a jacket? But it really does. And then if you want to get a pin, we can then just pull out the edge, these corners of these lapels. So we find those points, you know, those right angles that we sorted out earlier, so that they would sit nice and flat when they were turned through. That's what we're turning through at the moment. Just be careful, you don't want to be flicking at your edges like I just did then. Just roll the fabric between your finger and thumb. On this stretchy fabric, it doesn't want to lie perfectly flat straight away, but we will press it in a minute or two just to get it to lie flat. Down the bottom here as well, nearly there now. But you should be starting to see your jacket emerging now. And I hope you've enjoyed the video so far. If you have enjoyed the video, I would love it if you'd leave me a comment and just say whether you enjoyed sewing along with me. Hopefully you did. We're not finished completely yet, but we're getting there, look. Here's the underarm and our sleeve, and here's the back of our jacket. We're going to seal that up in a minute or two. But first of all, we're going to do something else with the sleeves, just to make sure they're going to lie flat once they're all finished. But yeah, got a lovely, lovely jacket coming together. So what we're going to do now first is we've made sure everything's all right and everything all sits nicely, and it's going to, once we've got that collar, we've got the front lapels which will fold back once it's pressed. You can see like that, and you've got your sleeves, and you've got your sleeves in front. We've got this little gap to close up at the back here, but first we're going to use this as an access point. So the first thing that I want you to do is to poke your finger down into your sleeve and make sure that your sleeve and your lining seams are together. I then want you to pinch them with your finger and thumb. Okay, so I'm inside the outer of the sleeve there, and I've got my lining inside, look, and I've got those two seams on top of each other. Just make sure you can put your fingers down the sleeve to be correct, because then what I want you to do is go inside with your inside the gap, and you're going to find where you are with the bottom of that sleeve. I'll tell you what, let's put a little pin in, that might help. Let's pin those together. So pin the lining and the lining and the outer on that sleeve. So there's my underarm sleeve point, and I've got that pinned together because I want to reach inside this sleeve and pull it through, back through to the inside. But I need to make sure I've not got my sleeve twisted. Okay, this is going to feel a little bit complicated, but just bear with me. So now I know I've got that sleeve seam together. Yeah, so there's my pin originally, and I've now got the sleeve gone through the little gap at the back in order to put that together. I'm going to take that pin out. But then what I want you to do is put the sleeve at that underarm point so that the right sides are together. If you're not sure about this bit, watch until the end before you start to do it, just so you don't get confused, because that will make it easier for you. And then once you've done that, just pop your pin back in again. And then what I want you to do is it's going to feel weird, but you're going to go around your sleeve and you're going to pin the cuffs together of both of those two bits of garment, but it's going to feel like it's going to get tangled up. I'll do this one this way, and then if you can't figure it out, I'll show you the other way of doing it, because there is a slightly easier way, but this is the more technical way of doing it. So just go as far as you can with your pins and just put those in that cuff, and then come round the other side. Then you should have a little bit of a gap, and then that should fit in there together. And I've pulled my sleeve somehow because one's longer than the other. So let's just ease this up just so that these are all the same length. Oops, I shouldn't put my pins in my mouth. There we go. So you just want this sleeve to be lying as it is, because then I'm going to take a hand sewing needle and some brown thread, and I'm just going to hand sew around this cuff. You can try and put it in your machine, but it might be a little bit tight for it to manage with. So we're just going to do a little back stitch in order just to sew those two together. So let's start at the underarm seam first. This is definitely one of those just got to trust the process points. So now those raw edges at the cuffs are both together, and I'm going to take a couple of stitches through the seam allowance only first of that cuff point, and now estimating my 1/4 inch, I'm just going to sew the lining and the outer of the jacket together at the sleeve point with a little back stitch. Luckily it's going to be hidden up inside the jacket, so you won't see it. So can you see I've got one finger inside the sleeve, and this is on the outer, and I'm just going to go around, all around here. So once you get past your pins, you can take your pins out. And your sleeve isn't tucked inside. Can you see how I've got like two tubes? One tube here and one tube for my sleeve, and my thumb is going through the middle, and that's between the two pieces of fabric. So the sleeve isn't actually, it's buttered up to it. It's not sitting inside it at this moment in time, because it can't, because when we turn it round the other way, it will sit inside it. That's the trust in the process bit. But just whilst we're doing this section here, it just doesn't, it just has to be two tubes that we're joining together. Just keep moving round and just keep moving those sleeves, that sleeve round so you've got it. As I say, I'll put a timestamp on the screen, so that if you've struggled with this one, just jump ahead to the other way of doing it, because it might make sense to your head a little bit better, because we all learn differently, and I've done this a few times now, so I know it works. But if this is the first time you've ever seen this, it'll blow your brain a bit, because it doesn't feel like it's right, but it is. Claire says with confidence. And at least you're not on camera, so if it doesn't go right, well, no, it will go right. But if you were trying something and it didn't go right, at least you've not got hundreds of people watching you. Okay, I'll just carry on just to do this. Hopefully my thread's going to be long enough. This is why the lining of the jacket is slightly shorter, so that it pulls the outer fabric up into the sleeve slightly, like it does on shop bought jackets, so that it will sit properly inside. Right, so let's do our stitches to join those up together. Only just got enough thread, look. Should be able to just cast off just easily just there. Oh, come on, thread through. Right. So now, when I take my sleeve back through again, through that gap in the inside, and now I'm going to pull the outer fabric down, and as it goes down it pulls the lining inside as well, and then you're going to have about 1/4 inch of the outer tucked up inside. And can you see how that has now gone inside there? So the lining is now attached all neatly inside the sleeve. There's a lining going inside the sleeve, look, inside there. Oops, you can see. And my finger can travel through there quite nicely and join up. Okay, so that's the one way of doing it. And if you're not sure, just rewind the video and watch it, because that's kind of like the magic way. The other way that you can do it is, if you turn your jacket, your sleeve, all the way through to the inside, through the lining as well. So you can see there's our sleeve from the outer pushed all the way through, and you'll see that the lining, we had that little 1/4 inch, didn't we, that we folded over finger pressed before. Just fold that inside to the edge there, and then just pull the lining inside the actual sleeve itself in, and turn that over as well. Okay. So now you've got to turn up on the jacket outer fabric, and you've turned under some on the jacket lining. Again, you've got to match that underarm point, because otherwise your sleeve will be twisted and you won't be able to get your character's hand in it. And you're just going to leave your sleeve about 1/4 inch difference to the two. So let me just put a pin in here just to show you. So that seam allowance is on top there. So as I go round, I'm going to tuck the outer into the sleeve lining so that it fits nicely. Make sure they've both got the turnover on them. And you're just overlapping those edges just slightly, just so that you can hand sew that down. So when you finish, look, can you see how that is? So I've got this bit here is tucked under inside, and that's tucked under, but you've still got to have that little difference there about 1/4 of an inch. If you just put a pin, I'm putting a pin all the way through to the other side, but when we sew this, get some more thread, and you'll see both methods give you the same finished result. It's just a different way of doing it. I prefer the one where you do it from the inside, because I think it's, although it's more complicated to look at it, it's slightly easier to sew it. Thread, that's it. Okay, so let me just put this together again, and then we're going to do a little slip stitch to stitch this other one together, and we're going to be careful that we only go through that we don't go through to the rest of it. So let's start again on this bit here where we've got this under section here, and let's just start our thread off just with a couple of stitches in place that aren't going to be seen. Tuck your knot down inside, and then we're going to take a little bite of the edge of the lining and a little bite of the edge of the outer, and a little bite of the edge of the lining. Watch out for your pins. And a little bite out the outer. And if you're careful, you might be able to do both at the same time. Just make sure you can't see your stitches on the inside here, because we don't want those stitches to be visible. You've just got to be nice and careful. Just a few threads of the outer fabric, and you'll see I'm sewing it down with that little step in the fabrics. And that's how it needs to be, otherwise it won't sit right. Oops, not too many threads, Claire. Try and keep it consistent all the way round. And then when you get to your pins, you can take your pins out as you go. Once you get back to the beginning again, just cast your threads off and then turn your sleeve through to the right side, and you'll be able to then see your finished jacket. Well, we're nearly finished. We've got a little bit to sew, haven't we? So I'll just carry on sewing around this sleeve, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll talk about slip stitching that back opening closed. So I've just finished sewing that second one, and that's how that's looking. And then we're just going to push that sleeve through to the inside again. Oh, sorry, to the outside again. Oh, I suppose the sleeve is line is going in, isn't it? But the jacket is then coming through. So the next thing then that we've got to do is we are just going to turn under the edge, the bottom edge of the lining that we had. Let's just give that a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance like we did on the back. And we're going to find the end of our stitches just there where that all sits nicely, and the end of our stitches there. Tuck that in, and we're going to follow the same line along the back of the jacket. So I've got a black line that goes across, so I can see where I need this to be stitched to in order for that to be stitched correctly and for it to follow nicely across the back of his body. When I've got that to where I want it to be, let's put a pin in just to hold it. So there you can see that that's just held in place with the pin at the bottom of that edge. And then we're going to use our thread again. Put a knot in the end. And I'm just going to find out where we start. Finish machine stitching. Bury our thread, our knot inside the actual garment itself. Just tuck that end in. Glasses again so that we can see this close-up work. And now I'm going to do almost like a ladder stitch really, which we used before. I'm just going to take a little bite out of the outer, and then I'm going to take a little bite directly across out of the lining. And I find this 2-step stitch works really well just to keep everything nice and neat. Just holding it together with my finger and thumb. We have got a pin in just to make sure that I didn't move it whilst we were sewing. I'm just going to work along this 2-inch gap and just sew this together. And that's how we managed to make a jacket where everything is lovely and neat on the inside, because you've got no raw edges anywhere visible on the outside of this, on the inside of this jacket, and it looks really smart. You can still follow Claire's instructions if you want to, Claire, who's the designer of Lily Rose Dolls, and you will still get a lovely jacket. But just by taking that extra step, we've just made sure that we can't see any raw edges on the inside of the jacket. And this is how we'd finish a full-sized garment as well if we were making for an adult or a child. So all these skills are directly transferable to your other garments. Just making sure everything's all lining up nicely, and it is. As I say, I hope you've enjoyed stitching along with me. If you could also give the video a thumbs up, that would be great. And if you're not a subscriber and you fancy being a subscriber and learning how to make more of these garments, then please do consider becoming a subscriber. It doesn't cost you anything. It just shows YouTube that you enjoy this video content, and then hopefully they'll push it out to more viewers in time, and then we can build the audience and build our community, which would be great. So I've got to the end of there now. I'm just going to do a few stitches just to anchor off this thread, and then leave a long tail on the thread, and that helps just bury it inside. And then snip off the thread close to your work. So the next thing now that we're going to need to do is need to give this a good press. Use our press cloth again just to make sure that everything's looking all nice and smart. Pull out any corners that you need to, and just roll your seams between your fingers to make sure that they are all where they should be. And then once we've given it a press, we can try it onto our character and just see how it's looking. So let me just go and give mine a press, and if you want to do the same, and then we'll try it on our characters, and I'll meet you back here for a little roundup. Okay, so here's our finally pressed jacket, looking all lovely and smart. This fabric does make it want to sort of stick out a little bit and kind of spring out, but I'm hoping once we've got that on the back of our character, it'll look better. So let's try it on. We've got Byron just here, so let's pop his arms into the sleeves, which fit nicely. Let's do his other one as well. There you go, Byron. Sorry, I'm having to bend your arm a bit. Pop that through, but everything's all sitting all nicely for his arms. I think in the picture his collar is up, isn't it? So his sleeves fit nicely onto his arms there, just really nicely. Here's the back of his jacket here, all lovely as well. That's all sitting nicely, and that shaping with the darts just takes out the curve of his back just there as well. And I have just pressed the reveres back on these edges on the back of the collar, just back slightly, in order that then holds open like that. And we can put his hands in his pocket so that he resembles the front of the picture there. And there he is with his lovely, lovely jacket on. Hopefully you can see that fits him very nicely indeed, and I'm really happy with that. Okay, let me turn the camera around and I will have a roundup. The only thing I want to say to you first is, before you forget, just change your needle over on your machine from the jersey needle or from your stretch stitch needle into your straight ordinary fabric needle, because the chances are you may not be working on a stretch fabric and then you'll be wondering why you're skipping stitches. So if you do it now, then you won't forget and everything will be all ready for you next time you use your machine. But for now, let me just turn the camera around and we'll have a roundup. So let's have a look at Byron in all his glory now that he's completely finished, shall we? Beautiful fall flunk trousers, his lovely waistcoat. We just tied his little neckerchief ribbon in there, that little crush ribbon. And there we've got his lovely jacket that is just fitting really nicely, that lovely cropped length on him that looks really, really smart. The collar's up, giving him a little bit of attitude, and those sleeves are the perfect length, just with his hands just poking out, just so that he can nonchalantly put those hands into his pocket. So I hope that you've enjoyed sewing along with me today. I hope you're pleased with your jacket for Byron as well, and that it's worked out really well for you. He really is a very dapper character, and I've absolutely loved every single minute of making him. And I think that the kit represents really good value for money when you get a result as good as this, because he really, really is a cut above, and very, very stylish and cute into the process. So I hope you enjoyed making Byron along with me. As always, my thanks goes to Claire and Richard of Lily Rose Dolls, who've gifted the kit for me so that I could then bring these tutorials to you. And I hope that, really do hope genuinely that you've enjoyed sewing along with me today. Have a look at my other playlists. You know, I've got plenty of other characters for Lily Rose Dolls now on the site, and hopefully on the channel, and hopefully we'll be adding more as time goes on as well. So I hope that you enjoy those. But thank you for joining me today. If you fancy leaving me a comment, I'd love you to leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of my Byron and what you think of your jacket, and also where you're watching in the world perhaps. But it's always lovely to hear from you and to interact with you. So on behalf of Byron and myself, we're going to sign off now and go and get some tea. But I hope you have a lovely day and happy stitching, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.